Hey, everybody. Welcome to Day Drinking with Authors, the interview series where I pick a book, the author picks a drink, and we discuss both. No drink this time around, although I'm drinking a good one. This is like a Canadian, it's called Darling Mimosa. Shout out to the people of Darling Mimosa. It's sparkling wine and orange juice, and I love it very much. So that's what I'm having. My guest tonight is a near and dear friend, an amazing writer. If you're reading dark romance right now, and you're not reading her, you're making a terrible, terrible mistake. You need to be reading Amelia Wilde. We're going to be talking about her latest book, Power Play, but we're really going to be talking about a lot of books. She's got a new series coming out that she's writing with Skye Warren that's really interesting. So it's kind of the whole thing. You're getting the whole Amelia package, but I'm going to read the back cover copy of Power Play. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a playboy wants a one-night stand, no strings attached. Gabriel Hill dates someone new every night, glamorous parties and smoke-filled clubs. He has no interest in the prim little baker until he finds out she's connected to his family's downfall. He wants information, revenge, and worst of all, he wants Elise Betancourt in his bed again and again and again. There is no future between them, a woman who's fought to build a new life for herself, and the man who will bring it all down. That's good back cover copy. Let's bring in Amelia.
Hello, hi.
Amelia. How you doing?
Good. I'm like, wow, that's a really good back cover.
It's so funny. I read the back cover copy before every interview, and every author has the same reaction. Like, it's one thing when you read it or you wrote it and you're like freaking out about it, but when you hear somebody else read it, you're like, yeah, that is pretty good.
That's really good.
Did you write that back cover copy?
Technically, I wrote an early joke draft of the back cover copy. So I didn't bring it all the way home, but I did write the beginning.
Was the Pride and Prejudice shout out at the beginning? Was that yours? I mean, it's not really a Pride and Prejudice retelling.
It kind of took an interesting turn from being more of a close Pride and Prejudice retelling, and then it ended up really just going in a different direction. So but the blurb still seemed good.
Yes.
Still fit the story.
I mean, there's a while where it feels like every book I'm writing is a Pride and Prejudice retelling.
I mean, in a way it was. There was a lot of rich people and like ballrooms and stuff, so same kind of vibe, I guess. Not really, but like
I in a day off that I took a few weeks ago, I watched Fire Island, the queer Pride and Prejudice retelling with Bo and Yang. No, this is not ringing a bell. Okay,
no.
Well, you need to go watch it. If you like Pride and Prejudice retellings, you need to go watch it. It is fabulous. It's really, really fabulous. But then that like sent me down the spiral, and then I had to watch the Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice, and then.
I mean, that one's a really good one.
I like that one the best. That's my favorite. Anyway, we weren't going to talk about Pride and Prejudice. Sorry.
we can. I personally don't know a lot of the fine details of the story. They don't stick in my head. So
have you read the book?
Technically, no.
Yeah, me neither.
As you know, I work a lot with Skye Warren, and while we were thinking about this book, we were talking about Pride and Prejudice, and she was like, well, this happens, and this happens, and this happens. And I'm like, look, all I know is that guy getting off the carriage.
That's right.
Like,
that's right.
That's it.
I've never read the book either, but I've read every retelling I can get.
I mean, I've seen the movie multiple times, but I'm not really sure what the problem is. I just know about the hand, you know?
A friend of mine wants to write like the sister's story, that the one that everybody forgets, like the grumpy sister. And she just gets so excited about it. And I'm like, I don't even remember who's doing it.
Does she even have sisters?
Is it Keira Knightley? If it's not Keira Knightley, or yeah. Anyway, so we were going to talk last week, but then I thought you were making a joke that you had to go to a costume party, but then you actually went to a costume party.
We did. We attended the Dangerous Press fairy tale costume party at Book Bonanza.
And you went
So,
in costume.
yes, we did. We
Now,
got there 2 hours late, so, that was a little bit of a miss, but, we did go in the full costumes.
and for the fairy tale party, tell them what your costume was for the fairy tale party.
The costume was that my husband and I dressed up as, Cersei and Jaime Lannister.
And that, folks, is Amelia Wilde.
I mean, that's it. We can, like, stop. That's everything you need to know about me. Um,
I mean,
that
I really
also
wanna
was
ask
a
you, do you
joke.
consider them a fairy tale, or are you just, like, winking at everybody?
Well, I do everything in my life based on a philosophy of, like, does it make a good joke? Which I know sounds weird, but it is the basis for a lot of my dark romance. But anyway, like a week and a half before Book Bonanza, my husband was like, "Are we gonna go to this party or not?" And I was like, "No," because I can't think of anything to dress up as, which I know I've done a Beauty and the Beast
Fairy
retelling.
tale. This isn't hard.
I was just like,
There
like,
is nothing.
I can't. He was like, "But you don't want me to try to dress up as Leo, do you?" And I was like, "I don't really, because you don't look anything like him and it would be weird." And so then he asked me, like, "Do you want to go?" And I said, "No, I can't think of anything to dress up as." And he said, "Well, just like look at this." And he texted me a picture of Cersei and Jamie from the show. And I was like, "I see your picture and I raise you. I'm going to find costumes on Amazon." He was like, "Good, find them." And so I did, and I had them shipped to Texas. And then we arrived in Texas, dressed up, and went to the party. So
Did anybody catch on?
no, and he would not, he was not a big fan. We walked in as they were holding a costume contest, but he would not let me join the costume contest. So it didn't end up being a public joke, but we did see it all the way through to the
Yeah, you
conclusion.
did. I laughed. I laughed pretty hard.
Yeah.
Seriously, the Lannisters at the fairy tale party.
Yeah.
All those Cinderellas, they were like, "What?"
Yeah, they were like, "What is this?" No, it's not what you think. It was mostly a, why didn't Jamie and Cersei get a happy ending? Because that would have been possible. It's my
Right.
main beef with Game of Thrones.
No, listeners, she does not mean that.
I mean, they were really the most, this is getting way off track. They were really the most committed couple, I think, of the whole Game of Thrones universe. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Well, they were. I mean, they certainly were. They certainly were. But I think that says more about the universe.
Yeah, they are. Whatever else you want to say about them, they were very loyal. So,
They murdered everybody else, but
yes.
I do feel like all of that feeds so clearly into your storytelling. Like
Incest does, or like just dark forbidden
dark,
romance?
dark but loyal. Dark but
Yeah.
loyal. As loyal is like the most redeeming feature you can sort of think of.
Yeah.
So I really want to talk to you about all of your books, how you approach all of your books, but particularly Power Play, and a comment that you made to me about Gabe Hill, who's the hero in the book.
Oh man.
And this was a conversation that we were having about, was it going to be, you write right now, you're writing trilogies.
Yeah.
And you were wrestling with the idea of, could Gabe be a trilogy, or would it just be 2 books, or what would it be? And your comment to me about why it should be a 2-book series was, Gabe isn't that messed up. And I want to talk to you about how your backstory and how you imagine backstory and how you come up with backstory feeds like so much of your book. But let's start with like the idea that the trauma and the backstory feeds 3 books.
Yes.
It's changed. You've messed Gabe up more since the last time I talked to you, and now he's a 5-book series.
I'm not day drinking, but I have had a gummy that had some things in it. And so like right now, I feel like I might be laughing this whole time, which is like maybe not appropriate for such like serious subject matter. But anyway, the question was that
backstory and
How
how much you like to mess them up, how much brainstorming you do around it, and how messed up they are feeds 3 books.
well, that kind of started with the first dark romance trilogy set that I did in 2020 and 2021, which was my Hades and Persephone retelling. And he has 2 brothers and also a sister, but she is a different kind of sister than in Power Play, and definitely different than Game of Thrones. But anyway, during those stories, it kind of developed around like one of the brothers has something that's outwardly different about him or wrong with him that is obvious to everyone else as a problem, but the other ones protect him even if they hate him. And so during those 3 trilogies, it was kind of like, okay, this is like how the guy in the middle is how everything forms around him, sort of. But then the other 2, since it's not outward, it's going to be even worse. So by
Amelia, that's really fascinating. So you're saying like in creating your trilogy, your hero, which then creates the trilogy, you're actually creating a family first.
Yeah.
Like you're creating 3 heroes and their trauma is reacting to each other's trauma.
Yes. So they're all
Wow.
chained together like this. And I don't know where I was like going to end up with this. Oh, with Gabe. I don't know how much to like go into it, just how it goes
Go
through
into
3
it.
books. So the
So okay,
first,
wait, real quick, is Gabe now going to be 3 books?
yes, he is. He's a full trilogy now. So like to go back off of this first hero has something that's obviously wrong. In my first series, that was Hades, who has a really tough time going out in the sun, which is like a huge understatement. But his brother Zeus, who's the second trilogy, is the one who mainly tried to save him.
Mm-hmm.
So ever since then, I'm like, who is the Hades of the situation? Well, that is the hero of my book, Net Worth, who has something obviously going on with him. But then his brother Gabriel, throughout his whole trilogy, was like playboy. He was always invited to parties, extremely charming, and even his brother is like, seems weird that he's so okay. So then when it came time to write Gabe's book, originally we had come up with a outline that was really closer to Pride and Prejudice. And when I was talking about it to you, that original version of Gabriel was the Pride and Prejudice guy. And I was like, I don't think he has enough problems to last for 3 books. And literally the next night after you left, I looked across the couch and I was like, no spoilers, but like, I think that this thing happened to him in his past. And it was like, oh yeah, that's probably right, which is like orders of magnitude darker than the original version, which is how it came to be a trilogy.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Something that's funny. And okay, so I want to ask you, so then you think of all this backstory that feeds the plot and then feeds these trilogies. How much brainstorming do you do on the plot? Because I know, like, as a person who knows you and reads drafts of your books before they're done, I know that you, like everybody does in a trilogy, which is like what a dumb idea. But like as we all do, but you get to that point where you struggle for what's the thing, what's the next thing, what's the big cliffhanger, so how much brainstorming do you do forward, or do you feel yourself concentrating so hard on what happened to them in the backstory?
I do a lot of plotting with Skye Warren, as you also know. And so she is like really a plot mastermind. And I am really just interested in how wounded he is. Like, can we please discuss how deeply wounded and what do you think happened in this? So like, that's where I am. And then eventually she's like, we're actually going to have to like write a story based on this.
Still has to happen.
So, we do a lot. We do a whole outline, and sometimes it's the wrong one, and then we change the whole thing and then like write it again. So like a pretty decent amount of what did you just
plotting?
Plotting. Yeah.
Okay, so now this is another question that I want to ask about backstory and trauma and sex.
Okay.
And how you tie them all together, and how it feels to me like when I read a dark romance where I can tell that the person has thought about what sex means to the characters. That's what I want in a dark romance, right? Like it doesn't need to just be like endless sex. It like in a dark romance, sex has to be a thing. It has to be a problem and a
Yeah.
like it just has to create so much energy and tension inside the books. It has to mean something to the readers. And that's one of the things that I love about yours is because they really do. It seems like you think about it. And is that part of the backstory brainstorming that you do?
I think it's definitely like an outgrowth of that. I don't know if I specifically, I mean, sometimes like with a character like Gabriel, it's really obvious how that would affect like his backstory would affect his whole perception of sex and what it is and how he wants to approach it.
Mhm.
Other times it's less obvious, I think. Maybe not less obvious, but maybe not as like connected to the damage. So like
Right.
sometimes it's really just about like being vulnerable in front of the other person or like letting them see you, and the sex is sort of like this other thing that the couple has together that's not necessarily about that. But with Gabriel it definitely did. So it does definitely play into it a lot. I don't know that I have to brainstorm it a lot or that it's just like I'm already kind of thinking about it.
Yeah, that's just where your brain goes. Are there some that are easier? Like I think about Leo Morelli in the Beauty and the Beast retelling. And I think about Daphne Morelli, her hero, who's the painter, and all this stuff about uh, sex in front of people, like present, like it feels like you thought of that almost like the same. It was the same time that you're like, here's this guy's thing, and this is his kink,
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it is definitely Skye who's like uh we're outlining and she's like, here's where the big sex scene is going to go, and she might have an idea of how it's going to start, but oftentimes maybe we'll just say like sex scene here. So
Right.
um but yeah, I do. This is going to sound so weird like later when this is on a podcast. I do think about it a lot, that sex scene and how it is. Especially I thought about it for Leo, and then again I guess maybe I always do, it's not especially. With Leo's story I knew that it was going to be really important, pretty much every scene, but especially towards the third book of his trilogy, because by then he's kind of, she's seen everything about him. um, and that's really why I love writing trilogies, because in the first book, you don't get that far like into this guy's head. In the second book, you really are, but then the third is just like all the worst stuff. So I
Mhm.
knew Leo's sex scenes were going to be important. For Daphne, it's so different because of her backstory, where it's not necessarily the sex that's like the key thing for her to like get over or like process through. Although there are definitely moments in that collector trilogy where it was,
Yeah.
and really for both of them. And so that scene actually took up so much of oh my god, what's it called, Sweet Mercy, because I really like I viewed it as a sex scene, obviously wrote it as a sex scene, tried to make it hot as possible, but it really is about like, I know this is going to seem weird, but like bonding with his brothers. Like to me, it's almost the sweetest scene that like I could ever write, because he literally is like, look at what I found, like this great
Yeah.
piece. Do you like her? Do you think she's beautiful? And they're like, yeah, we do. And so it's like this, these brothers have not been able to be as close as they want. And then all of a sudden in this scene, his brothers are like revealing to him like, oh, we really understand you and how you need to talk about this stuff. You can't just
Right.
come to us and say like, I love her, she's my most prized possession. So you do like this weird, like sexy, kinky, like art gallery sex scene. And so that's honestly, to go on another tangent, one of my favorite scenes that I've ever done, because it's so much about like their relationship as brothers and their relationship as a couple, and like, can we all like accept each other? Will you make fun of me or say that like my art sucks or whatever?
like,
So
right.
yeah.
It is, I mean, again, like that scene is what I feel like successful dark romance is, right? Like it's when the sex scene is not just subversive and, you know, somebody, it's, you know, as Annika Martin says, like every sex scene has to reveal and cost somebody something, but it also reveals so much about who these people are and what they really want. Like what this man really truly wanted was, you know, the love of his family and the love of this woman and everybody to be on board.
Yeah, and it's like, that's why I'm like, that scene was kind of controversial when the book released, and you know, there were comments like, did she just do this for the shock value? And I'm like, no, like I really feel like a guy who has an art gallery in his house would do this as a gesture and as a like a reaching out. And then underneath that, the heroine is kind of young in her family. She's not as powerful as her like rich, you know, siblings, and she's been very sheltered. And then like in this moment, she's like, this is my spotlight. This is like where I'm the center of attention, but there's no danger in it. Like her siblings have been warning her. So I'm like, man, this is really good. Like, good job to me.
Have you ever written a draft of a book, or even as, you know, as many drafts as a book where you struggled with the sex scenes? You struggled with the connection between the sex and the characters?
If I have, it's that like more of the book needs to be rewritten. Sometimes I just don't understand, or it's hard to see like what exactly, you know, is the damage of this guy. And then sometimes there are other scenes missing from the book that kind of underpin that. And so then it can be kind of hard because you're like, what is this sex scene about? And like, what is he trying to show her? So yeah, I mean, that's happened for sure.
So you are telling me, I want to just repeat this, like for anybody writing romance right now, that the times that you've been writing and you've struggled with a sex scene, usually the problem is you don't know that character well enough. You don't know the hero well enough. And you've got to go back and change or fix something about the character.
Yeah, 100%.
Wow. And see, and I think that's why your dark romance is really good. I mean, I know, like, I've written a couple of books, and this is a thing that I talk about in a workshop a lot, about sex and intimacy. Like, this is, my dog is here, and she's got one of her 20,000 bones. So, oh, this dog. So I'm sorry if you can hear that. Now what was I saying?
You were like, your dark romance is really good.
And that's what I was saying. Amelia writes the best dark romances,
and like the sex scenes.
Yeah, but the sex has to come out of the character. Like it really does have to spring from the character. And I feel like, you know, it's easy to write a lot of sex, but it isn't easy to write really interesting sex.
Yeah, and it's not just the sex that I've noticed. Like since I started doing trilogies and writing dark romance, and I also took a immersion class with Margie Lawson that was really great. But I noticed that in my early books, I couldn't really figure out like, you know, that deep point of view where you're seeing everything from the character's eyes. And so I feel like my books are getting a lot different from each other. Like it's still my voice, but the things that they're talking about and thinking about are so specific to that. Like the Collector trilogy was actually really hard to write because the main character, both of them are artists. And so everything they see is beautiful, you know, and like you can't, and especially the main character, Emerson, who has other issues where he's trying to, like, his brain literally uses art to cope. So when he's looking at a room, he's not even seeing like what's there. He's seeing this as like, how is it art? Like, and it really becomes a painting in his head. So anytime there's any description, you know, it's like, this is how it is. And here's the colors and the shadows and everything about this. So it was like, that was tough. And then trying to switch out of it, you like start writing somebody else and you're like, wait, This guy doesn't notice trees. He's not going to notice the light slashing from a street lamp or whatever. Like, none of that. Like, he's just going to work. So
that's really interesting. So let's talk about trilogies and how you kind of view them, and if you view them differently than when you started writing, in terms of like how, as a person who's done one of them and the third book was like nearly the end of my career, it is not easy. It's just not easy to keep mining backstory and keep making things fresh and interesting, and people coming together in different ways, until they like fits together so perfectly. So tell me about how you felt about trilogies when you started and how that changed as you've been writing them.
Like when I started writing at first?
Yeah, like when you first started writing trilogies.
Oh, well, when I first started writing trilogies, I really did not know what I was doing. And once again, Skye Warren had to be like, here's what it is, because I kind of thought like you just divide the story of one book in 3. Like, but then it was like, no, and then I started thinking of it as like the first book is just kind of like the entryway into the character, and then the plot is going to like support that, and then the second book is like even deeper into the characters, and of course the romance, and then the third book is like all the way, into their deepest fears and stuff. And so that's how it started. And then like after 2 years, she mentioned like, okay, like, how she said, how like every time we do a book, the hero goes from his like outer shell to his inner essence. And I was like, what? And she's like, well, here's this like, is it Michael Haig or something? She's like she's like, here, the identity. She's like, we do this every book, each book does this transformation for part of his damage, for part of his whatever it is with him, and that's how you get to like the hero at the end. And I was like, have we been doing this the whole time?
This is completely news to me.
Yeah. And she was like, yes. And so like that's how my brain works, is like, I don't really know. I couldn't really tell you what we're doing until someone is like, and here's how he transforms from like this part. Like, here's this guy's 3 levels. And I'm like, oh, I knew that on some level, but I didn't know it consciously. And now that's how I think of trilogies. But before, I just thought of it as more abstract of, just like going deeper into whatever his damage was.
So you like, every facet of creating a story is told through your hero.
Yeah.
Wow. I like, that's got to be another reason why your books resonate, right?
I hope so, because I can keep doing it. That's what it is.
Have you had books where the heroine was clearer to you and you're like, nope, readers don't want that. Readers want hero.
I think over time it's I just love the heroes so much. So maybe that's like my personal failing, that I'm kind of like, whatever happened to the heroine happened, and like that was her story. I think in general, I kind of write stories that lend themselves to a less damaged heroine and a more innocent one. Yeah. And so when that's kind of the case, it's like harder, I guess, to front load that much onto her also, because then I think honestly you'd end up with like 6 books. Like, I think it would be really tough to do that level of transformation. And of course she does transform, but maybe not in such a drastic way. I just think it would be a lot to fit into 3 books.
Right. And there's a level of, if it works, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Like, it's working for you. That's really remarkable. I also want to talk to you about the like never ending pleasures and delights of revenge romance. And also how it can be a pitfall too, right? Like, it can kind of, as a person who loves to read and write revenge romance, I feel like I run into a place, every 5th book where I'm like, oh God, I've done this. Like, do you feel the same? What draws you to it?
It gives the hero something to do. like What other goal is he gonna have?
Oh, that's good. That is good.
It really does. I mean, in a serious way, it really does
it's a
like
hobby.
animate the whole thing. Yeah.
Our special guest is here.
Oh, yay.
Here we go. So I'm going to bring in Skye Warren. I will get her answers to some of these questions, and then we're going to talk about how you guys work together.
Oh, yay.
Oh my goodness.
Hey.
Skye Warren.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm sorry. I'm a little bit distracted because I'm like, me. But anyway.
We're happy to have you. Thanks for being able to come by. I see you've got your pup behind you.
Yeah.
Always.
Maybe 6. Okay, good. I'm going to go on here. I'm going to exit.
Yep.
I'm going to make a dramatic exit.
It's very dramatic. That was her.
That's right. And that's all we get. She's going to come back in on her other device.
Yes.
All right. Do you have a dog, Amelia?
We do not have a dog.
You're like, can't be not one more thing in this house. Would your husband have a dog? Your husband would have a kid. He'd have 5 more kids.
Yeah. We actually said in our wedding vows, we vowed to never have pets. Because neither person wanted to be responsible for anything else in our lives, which was probably a good idea.
Yeah, stick with it. Stick with those vows.
Yeah, although now my daughters are asking for a dog. And so that might be the one thing that chips us apart.
That'll be the end of you. Hi, Warren.
I require 6 dogs at all times.
Was that a part of your vows?
No, but it should have been, because someone is trying to take steps back and I'm like, no, only forward. Thank you.
So Skye, we were just talking about the never-ending pleasures and pitfalls of revenge romance, and you've written your fair share of those as well.
I love it.
Yeah, and I love reading it. And Amelia's very succinct answer was that it gives the hero something to do.
It is sometimes people are like, where's the plot? And you're like, it's the revenge. That's the plot. So,
and just lying to her, or she's lying to him, and all the secrets, it writes itself until it doesn't.
Yeah. And it's it gives it that, enemies to lovers tinge, and that love-hate relationship early. They've got to be enemies. They can't be on the same side. No.
Yeah, you two are not much for friends to lovers, are you? Gag. So I was just about to ask how the reason I was excited to talk to Amelia for all of the things that we've talked about, but I was excited to have you on as well, Skye, because I know that so many of Amelia's answers would be well, Skye and I do this. And they have been. So I was talk to us about how, because you guys you're on some projects you co-write, on other projects you don't co-write. You're more than beta readers, you're more than critique partners, the
line is definitely blurring.
We have a common law relationship by now.
Right, exactly. We are married in certain states. Just because it's when you find a system that works, you're like, why not do this for all the books? If the book turned out better this way, let's do more of that. And
so what is the system?
Well, it evolves.
The system is a 2-tiered joke to seriousness system.
You like me being all vague, well, it evolves. Her being specifically, no. Let me describe.
So Amelia, you're I'm going to write this super ridiculous joke book premise.
That is definitely the way we write blurbs.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep. Just, yeah.
I think that's the best way, honestly, because because then you get to really dig into what the characters' motivations are before you're worried about how to say what they are in a blurb way. You know what I mean? And what the conflict is. So, like, do we want to read the one that you just wrote for?
Yeah, we can give a live example. How
The
about this?
Collector's Trilogy.
So this is the joke blurb that I wrote.
Okay, you have to read the joke blurb, and I can read the real blurb.
For the box set of the Collector Trilogy, which is apparently coming out at some point.
So for those of you who might not know, this is the series where they're both artists, and he does the sexy, kinky art show thing, and his brothers are there. So
well, he's an art collector, so he acquires her for the gallery. But yes, there is an art show. Anyway, this is the joke blurb that I wrote for this earlier this afternoon. Sorry, this is not usually something that I read on a podcast. Daphne Morelli is the nicest, sweetest Morelli of them all, which is saying something in a family full of villains and probably murderers. So when a patron at her art gallery takes an interest in her paintings, she is thrilled. She doesn't know that he's a huge stalker. It turns out he's not just interested in her art. He's interested in acquiring her as part of his collection, so he does. Now she's the painting, and guess what? Paintings never go anywhere again.
Right? So
it starts out top tier to begin with.
Chef's kiss on that joke blurb.
Paintings never go anywhere ever again. HEA. So what did that morph into?
Okay, so the follow-up was, Daphne Morelli loves her life as a starving artist. She came from a family of wealth and power, but she doesn't care about anything but her paintings. A patron comes into the small art gallery. He's interested in her work. Very interested. It's a dream come true, except he doesn't only want art. He wants her to be the central masterpiece of his collection. He'll stop at nothing to make her his next acquisition.
Yeah, those are very different. Those are two different books there.
Are they? Are they though?
No, they're not. No, they're not.
So,
I mean, we could just try publishing with the joke blurb once and just see what happens. But
well, more than one time, some lines from the joke blurb.
Oh, sometimes lines make it in, but oftentimes they do not. It's just, we talked about actually on the retreat. Remember how when we dictate, and we're not trying to turn those specific words into what the final words have to be. It's just like a placeholder for where the final words will be.
It's part of the process.
It's the vibes of the chapter. In other words,
we
vibes. So Amber, we were talking about how one of the things that I'm really struck with talking to Amelia about her process, which I've never really talked to her about, is how much everything comes from the hero, like from the heroes, and in many cases, the hero's backstory and trauma. How do you approach your books? Like, how do you approach your characters?
Well, I definitely subscribe to like the Michael Hay method of storytelling, where having a wound and having a difference between your essence and identity is like really central to characterization, right? Like they always have to overcome that. It always goes back to the wound. And it actually came up. We just got back from Book Bonanza. This was actually scheduled during Book Bonanza, and then we realized that, and we're like, that is not going to work. So
what fairy tale did you go as? If Amelia was Cersei Lannister.
Oh, I wore a dress that had Alice in Wonderland on it. No one could tell that because it was dark, and the darkest dress is black. But it was in spirit and in both reality, because I also emceed the costume contest. And I will tell you guys that my worry was that even though I showed up, tons of people were dressed up, like some elaborate outfits, some like lesser outfits. And I was like, I'm a little bit worried, sometimes participation, it was like also the first whole night of the event. So like everyone's still like, feeling nervous, dipping their toes in water and stuff. I was like, I wonder if enough people are going to do it. I was like, we should have a participation prize that's random. And, because like, even though they dressed up, they may not want to actually be in the contest. And so I was like standing there on this stage and I was like, all right, guys, if you're ready, if you want to do the contest, like, please come forward. And I thought low end 5 people, mid tier 10 people, max tier, I was thinking 20. I swear to God, like 75 people stood up and
Oh my gosh.
All sorts of fairies, princesses, dragons. There was one lady, Danbury, like we just converged on me.
Wow.
I was unprepared completely for how to navigate a contest of that size.
So then she's trying to have them vote by cheering for 75 different people.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was determined before we knew the number of people who were going to be in it. They were very tired by the end, let me tell you, but none more than me. So
oh, that's a hard lesson learned.
So we were also on a dark romance panel, and someone asked the question, you know, how do you, so that a lot of times the hero is having some sort of wound or, you know, darkness or reason why he is that way. And not as an excuse, especially once you get to like the super dark, but just also a reason, right? Especially if you're going to have a transformation. But, and so her question was, this person in the audience, like, what do you do if there's not that wound? And some of the authors addressed it, you know, sort of the psychology of maybe like being a sociopath or going into that like pathology angle. And I was like, that's really tough for me. I didn't end up answering because it was like towards the end, and that was fine because I didn't have a good answer, which is almost that I don't think I could write it, or it would be a totally other, I don't know. I'd have to, because it's like my entire vision of storytelling.
Yeah, what would be the point?
Yeah. I mean, I struggled with it, right? Like, but I almost think, you know, even if you think of like Sherlock, who was, what was he, like a sociopath, a high functioning sociopath, like he still has wounds, right? That are the way they are. And, you know, your wound can be something huge and terrible. Like I got physically scarred, which Amelia does enjoy. Or I have like emotional scarring, which I enjoy. Or, you know, they can just be something that made your worldview what it is. And that's what's going to shift during the book, right? Because it is that story of transformation.
Right.
That you go through because of the conflict. You don't just go through conflict. You don't just, as Harry Potter, go defeat Voldemort. You also become someone else and overcome things in the process. So I was like, I was glad that they didn't come to me because I didn't have a good answer for that. So yeah,
well, the answer is that we would give him one, like we
That's
did.
right. What do you do if you have a character?
Right. Well, that's the thing about you know, that's why I mentioned Sherlock, because I mean, if you're writing a character that is a sociopath and you're like, you know, what was that like growing up? You know, It's not always sunshine. It can't be for everyone, you know, for anyone. That's what I'm saying. So something must have happened, even if he had that pathology that is shaping his worldview.
I just don't think, I mean, I know that like in a broader fiction, like, you know, in the wide spectrum of fiction, there are books written about people who don't have wounds and don't have things that they have to get over. But those are not the books I'm drawn to. And they're certainly not the books I'm drawn to reading. Like, I just feel like, you know, I feel like we read books to like feel. And that is you know, I want to feel I don't want to feel their trauma, but you understand my point. Like I want to feel their healing.
Right. And I think, and it is true. Well, see, that's the thing. I would actually struggle to write or read any book in any genre that didn't have that. That's why I was like really sitting with it. But because like I read a lot of suspense, romantic suspense, where it's like sort of like a police procedural. We have to solve this mystery. There's usually like partners or people at odds, like a reporter with a, you know, police guy. And so the wounds get much more subtle, but they're totally there.
Yeah.
You know, like not.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think there's really a story where somebody doesn't have some kind of wound.
Right.
It's just like a matter of is really.
Or I've like fully immersed myself in the cult of Michael Haig. I don't know.
I think they do. I think everybody does.
Well, you know, the other thing that you read a lot in dark romance is characters set up with wounds, like damaged people, but then those wounds sort of never get addressed. They never get, like, they just kind of get glossed over, or they get mind every once in a while, but they don't ever, there's no resolution for that. And I feel like that's a disservice to dark romance, because that the not the healing of it, but the discovery of it, the talking about it, the figuring it out, the revealing of it to another person, that's all where the good stuff is.
Yes, completely. And, and I was saying, like, suspense, it's like more subtle, it's more in the background, versus the kind of books we write, it's definitely shining a spotlight and then just like kind of leaving it there while everything plays out. So you're like at the most raw part of the experience,
Yeah. That's a really interesting point.
I just had this vision of like Cirque du Soleil. It's been so long since I went, but it's an entire stage and your eyes are just so drawn to whatever they're spotlighting. And I just had that vision.
And it's always the person that's about to like tumble to their death.
Mm-hmm.
Like the stakes are the highest where the spotlight is. Yeah.
It's never the guy who's just like moving the mat over. No.
There's, here's the person just swinging on the, no, that's exactly right. It's where the spotlight is. That's really interesting.
I mean, my favorite thing is that usually there's a way to make it so the guy can't be healed from his wound until he can tell someone about it, which usually does not happen in full until like the end of book 3. So that's just my favorite.
We have worked a lot. Unfortunately, Michael Haig neglected to supply a romance trilogy version of his work. So I've had to do my own porting of that. So that has evolved over time. Like, it's definitely better now than when I started. But yeah, I mean, I think that they actually have totally different aspects. That's what I think is so powerful about a trilogy, is that they either have to overcome 3. They're usually not completely separate wounds, but they're separate parts of the wound.
Like
so
when
I
you
actually just
read surface part of the wound and then
you have to dig in, but that's the benefit, is that you never could have dug in on just like one big book, or if it would become very long and and more complicated, which is okay too. But I'm saying it's not just one wound identity to essence transformation happening across 3 books. No, there's like 3 little ones and like one overarching one.
That is so much more, like, you make me want to write another trilogy. That's just
what?
So more
that
I was never, so I want to ask you about this too, because the thing that I got so fixated on, because it's another thing that I love, which is the cliffhanger. Like, I just wanted the juiciest, meatiest cliffhanger I could think of. And so how do you throw that ball into the
right? And like the story structure of that, is just like a craft that we've been perfecting over and over and over again, because I mean, that has to blend with the identity and essence. And actually one time I was in a live talk, like in person, in the room, and someone raised their hand. Michael Haig was like, yes, you. And it wasn't me. I'm making it sound like it was me. But she was like, well, what do we do if it's a cliffhanger? And he was like, that's episodic writing. That's different. And then that's it. Did not elaborate. I cannot find anywhere he wrote about that. It still would be slightly different. I think the trilogy is truly like the 3-act structure of a series. So I still think it might be a little bit different, but I still would like to read about episodic writing, more about that. That is not written about nearly enough either.
Yeah, it's like you think about those like long spy or detective series, like where, Jack Reacher, there's 7 million books about him and they're never cliffhangers. I mean, think about how much better and more exciting it would be if they were. Are you listening to us?
Well, no, I mean, I think, and some, who I've been reading is, Anne, it's not Malcolm. We were just talking about her because of her anthology. You know who I'm talking about? She has the crows on the cover.
Tony?
Only Molly might know. Amelia, you're not going to know this one.
I don't know this one.
Anne Fraser.
Okay. No, I'm thinking of Anne Bishop. Okay, go ahead.
She might No. She is someone else, but she is someone you know. She used to be Teresa Weir.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And her books, what's interesting about them, I mean, I think these are with Montlake, or Thomas and Mercer, actually. Sorry, Montlake would be romance. These are with Thomas and Mercer and marketed very heavily as thriller, like the cover, and it makes sense too. I mean, actually, some of the thriller elements are really intense, and
but there is romance.
But it's absolutely romances. It's trilogy romances. She puts together the people, like the partners, and then in book 1 and book 2 and book 3, they have the exact story structure that we use to get them together at the end. In fact, one of them, I read like most of her books that are out right now. One of them was so harrowing and so dark. The heroine had just gone through hell. Like, and like, you know, for me to say that, I'm saying it's bad.
Right.
Like, just like what I can write and not blink. And I was like, how is she even gonna pull this off with a romance? And then she did pull back and just had them and sort of made friendship the HEA. But it was still like them against the world. You know, that relationship was still central. And
that's really interesting. I would like to hear her thoughts on trilogies.
Yeah, it's super interesting to see this being done because it's very successful. Obviously, anything Thomas and Mercer does, she can obviously write. But if you talk to most thriller people, they're like, oh, our readers don't like cliffhangers. And I'm like, these books over here beg to differ.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So another thing we have to talk about, and I feel like it's a bit of the elephant in the room, is we have to talk about deadlines. We have to talk about the relationship with deadlines.
Me and Amelia's faces. If you're hearing this via podcast,
you don't want to talk about this
or any audio, then you're missing a core part of our existential pain.
Yeah.
It's gotten worse, right? for listeners who may not know, like Amelia and Skye are like notorious for, there's Amazon and uploading onto Amazon has to happen. Like they give you a second by second countdown. And what's the tightest you've uploaded?
Personally,
she has more balls than me. I will say that very clearly. Like even when it's her own book, and I have it's not like for my press. It's not my name's not on it, and I'm just like, upload it. Don't take the risk. What are you doing? And I just bother her for like 24 hours.
So the book will be done and you won't upload it, or you'll be like tweaking and changing?
We're tweaking, getting proofreaders, still working. Like we will at the last minute, like we'll be having so many people read it and we'll be like, oh my God, should we do this? And then if we do make a change, then we have to get a proofread again. I mean, I think we sort of got ahead here. But then it's hard because I think that like our work is not liquid, it's gas, so it expands to fill the space we have available. So even when you get ahead, you're like, oh my God, well, I have all this time now and I can make this even more perfect than I would, if I had just. So plus we have a very nasty tendency of whenever we like an idea and get really excited about it, just add it to the schedule. Just add it. We'll make it work. Have we not said those words?
I'm sure we have.
Many times.
The latest I've gone on a pre-order is that in 2019, I uploaded one with 29 seconds left on the clock.
Oh my God, no.
Yeah.
I swear to God, I'm having a heart attack. If I have a heart attack and it's around like a Friday on 6 p.m., you know why.
Yeah, my last book, she starts messaging me like 3 hours in advance. And I'm like, what is your problem? And she's like, you have to upload it. I'm like, I still have 3 hours. I'm still changing some stuff.
So is it the kind of thing that like once you've pushed that envelope so far, you know where it is, like where that boundary is, right?
I mean, anything can always happen in our world, but yeah, sometimes you just
Actually,
end up with less time.
Well, I know for me, I am strategic, which is like the Becca Symes strengths thing. And so
The rule is if you talk about Becca Symes and your strengths on the podcast, you have to drink something. Do you have something
do
to
a
drink?
shot.
I have an empty cup. I have an empty
Getting water.
bottle of water. I have an empty
I don't know anything
Animal
about
Crossing
this,
tin. So
Amelia will do your drink. Do your
it's
drink.
really sad. Oh, but you know what I do have is a Stroke of Midnight cookie from Dangerous.
There you go.
Wow.
So I can eat this dry. Thank you. Oh gosh. So anyway, so what it meant is that I would always like basically I did this about arriving late to the airport. I was always like weirdly proud of how close I could cut it on being late to the airport, like, you know, or last minute. And like, you know, I'd come in, I would be like the equivalent of whatever would make Amelia sweat, because I would breeze through security, but I needed to breeze through security. And then I would walk over, the gate would be boarding. I'd be the last person on. I would just like slide into my seat. And I was like, that was beautiful, you know, not a second to spare. And then, you know, a few years in, I missed 2 flights, not back to back, but very close together for slightly different reasons. But it was enough. The pain of that was enough that I was like, you know what? Solid 2 hours. Domestic flight. I don't care. I'm going to be there or be square. And so this is kind of like that. Like I could push my deadline so close and I could never convince myself, well, do it earlier. Pretend like your deadline is earlier, because I'm like, I know when it really is.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
So, but I did, unfortunately, the same exact thing where I actually kept pushing it closer and closer and closer until I was like, that broke. So then I have to fix it for real, which is kind of what's been happening the last, like the second half of 2021 and the early half of 2020.
Well, it's not like there hasn't been enough, like, you know, drama in the world to
it's
knock us all off our game. But so in terms of the process of writing these books and coming up with these ideas, how much of your time is spent, like how many characters do you have right now for future books working away in the back of your brain?
How many outlines do we have that are outlined?
We have 4 outlined, 4.5. 5, but 2 of them are half outlines.
And these are for single books, or they're for 5 trilogies?
They're 5 different books. All of them are for different trilogies.
So how long are those sitting kind of on the back burner? You're thinking about them?
No, we got ahead because we used to do one at a time. And so for us to have 4, that's a proof that we're ahead, because previously we've just been like 1.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, how much time do you spend thinking? How much time do you spend writing? And is that, and I my guess is that this is going to be an interesting answer.
Oh my God, the pressure.
I have faith that you,
the pressure she just put on that.
Yeah. I mean, I would say the thinking well eclipses the writing, because
I think by doing the process that we do, because I used to just be a serious drafter. In fact, like to the extent that unless this needs major revisions, like that's it. That's what's on the page, just what's going to end up on the page. I just edited and stuff. And we've like moved it now. We've like expanded the space between the layers like a lasagna. And so now the thinking is done while we're outlining. And then the thinking is done again while we're dictating. And then the thinking is done again while we do the first pass. And then the thinking is done again while the other person does the other pass. So rather than having to sit there in like, you know, this hour period and come up with like the perfect, you know, 5 paragraphs, which is a fine way to write. And it is the way I wrote for a long time. We're now coming up with like the way that you imagine people would do sketching. And I'm not an artist, so I don't know that, but you sketch in the overall shape, and then you start drawing in more details, and then you start drawing in more details, and then you add color, and then you add more color. Yeah.
I also think that there's other points where it ends up being, I think the farthest we've gotten on a book which happens to be Gabriel's book, if not others, actually having recorded a whole draft and then been like, the book is wrong.
Right. You can realize that. And then you're a little bit more free than when you feel like you have something pretty final and pretty good, but it's all written hinging on some wrong direction. You feel a little committed to that. Versus all of these like basically drafts allow you to see, like if you're drawing it and the composition is way off in the sketch phase, then you don't keep going.
Yeah, you catch it faster, right? Like when you
which you actually got to witness live at a retreat, me doing the thing that I do when the book is wrong, which is to come up with and harass Skye about a completely new series.
Right. It's just not even worry about this terrible idea or this terrible problem, this on fire thing in front of you, and just think about a different book.
Yes.
That's some like grade A, like, what is that called? Transferent, whatever.
But I definitely wouldn't have changed it if I had gone all the way to like, I've sent it to proofreaders and now I'm going to have other people read it. I would have just had to leave it.
Yeah, you'd have just kept it.
Yeah.
But you're also, the two of you are also, well,
I think it's hard, because you're evaluating like cost, right? The cost of me completely rewriting this book, when even in the most generous schedules, you usually didn't include rewriting a whole book, so, and so, yeah, I think that ultimately it's producing a better book. It's also a more layered book. Because we're going over it so many times, we can layer things in deeper. In a way, it's like we enjoy it. In a way, it's harder. You know what I mean? There's more time spent on it, I feel like.
Well, we thought it was going to be faster, and then it turned out it wasn't faster. But
it turned out to be, in fact, quite slower, but better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it slower because you're writing like, there is so much more thinking. And I do think that kind of thinking, that creative, thoughtful thinking, makes a better book, but it does take time.
Yeah. I think just like our thinking has become very active, right? So I'm like, go like transcribe this or go over this transcription. That is I'm just like moving out of the way so my dog can, she's part weenie dog. So she's very long. She's got to like have a runway.
Jump up.
Yeah. Right. So like our thinking is like, we have built in all this thinking time into, our lasagna. And
does it take the pressure off, or does it add a different kind of pressure?
So this really plays into our 2-tiered system, which is joke system.
So like, if something is,
yeah.
If something is stressing you out that you would get stuck on in a draft, if you're the kind of person who writes pretty final-ish drafts, to start with, like really fleshed out, and like all the lyricalness is there and the symbolism is there and every paragraph is perfect. What were we talking about?
We were talking about, oh no, I forgot too.
No, the pressure girls.
It was
the pressure. Right. Then you're like, then if you get to a part that's like intimidating, it's.
What was the original?
I just made her go.
Was there more or less pressure?
Right.
Oh,
if you get to a part that's intimidating, you feel like you can't go past it, or it's like hard to leave it. Whereas we can just be like, I just like did it real fast, or she can leave brackets for me.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I will literally come in to like a book where it's like sex, fun, hijinks, banter, and then it's like this painful emotional scene where they're confronting each other, and I'm like, all right, I'm ready to work, let's go.
Yeah.
1,000 words of their deepest moment.
It's really a pattern that's like very early on, I think. I have several throw pillows of joke lines that I have written, just really good ones,
What if
our latest one, I haven't put it on a pillow yet, but I will, obviously, is like, it's a rom-com. So we'll say everything is a rom-com. Like, it's a rom-com because we're like, oh, they're so cute together. They're so in love. And then at the end, you know, we like deepen and layer in like the
Yeah,
extreme.
you guys aren't writing.
This just happened. This was this system worked flawlessly for our recent, just out today, novella, The Crash. So the joke outline, which I would read in its entirety because I was so proud of it. I wrote it while I was actually watching Tarzan, like Disney's Tarzan,
Yes.
on the TV. And it's like just this wonderful outline, frankly. And then like the non-joke outline is even better than that. So like then you have like the joke first draft where it's like you kind of take it seriously, but if there's any part you just write as a joke what it would be, and then like the final is out now for everyone to read.
And the final is realizing that you have built this body like around a knife in the stomach, and then you just feel pain.
Yeah.
And that, dear listeners, is their process in a nutshell. So let's talk about The Crash. So the Crash is a free prequel. It is Carter Morelli. For those of you who haven't maybe picked up a book in the Dangerous Press world, which is Skye Warren's publishing company, Amelia has written, this is like your third trilogy in the
Third trilogy.
Leo.
Yes, third trilogy. Leo,
Yeah.
Daphne.
And it's kind of like it's these warring families. It's the Constantines and the Morellis, varying degrees of villainy, you know, varying degrees of goodness. Like it's all very rich. It's all very detailed. It's some of it's soapy, some of it's not soapy, some of it's tragic and sad and scary. It's all the best stuff. Carter Morelli, the free prequel that's out today, The Crash. Tell us about it.
So we, like we were talking about our process, we pretty much do that on every book, whether it's her book or my book. Like I said, the line is blurring, but this is one of the ones where we were like, we are co-writing this. Like both of our names are on this. This is just like from both of us to everyone. It's a gift. It's our Tarzan, sexy, fun, rom-com.
Well, it does. I mean, of all the beginnings of your books that I've read, this is
You're like, this could be a rom-com. We'll
if it weren't for the terrible plane crash.
And its original joke form, it very much was a rom-com. So
yeah, it's not a,
you can kind of feel the echoes through it.
So yeah, I mean, we just wanted to do this. And this is definitely one of those passion projects where we were like, our schedule is full. Cool. And then we were like, but what if we wrote Tarzan?
Well, actually, we were on another Zoom live.
Yeah, we were doing Romance Jeopardy, as you do, just hosting that for some readers. And Amelia was present. But I mean, physically, she was there with us on the Zoom, but emotionally, she was just doing the Tarzan retelling in her head. So, yeah, we added that to the pile, and we cared not for schedules. Like, we just did not care at all, but it did, which was extremely painful now for us, past us, unkind.
Really,
but
really.
Carter Morelli is interesting because he is a professor at Oxford, and he studies biology. Specifically, he studies rhizomes. The amount of research that I have done on rhizomes is outrageous.
Yeah,
he's got very fun, Indiana Jones, but with guns vibe.
Yeah, because the thing about rhizomes is it's not just that he's going to sit there and talk about rhizomes and like teach rhizomes to her or to the reader or anything like that. It's that his every thought is framed by rhizomes, which, by the way, is a root structure that is more complex and deep than just regular roots.
So
like
what
ginger
grows out of this literally is that Carter is a guy who's like the most removed from his family physically, but he loves them and feels really guilty about it, and also like sees a lot of them very clearly but doesn't really see himself. which I don't know how that relates to rhizomes, but like she could tell you probably.
When you can find that thing, that like the character thing that they do that ties directly into all the things that they feel, like you're clapping your back.
Like we usually have a thing, and we usually have it before we're writing the book. And what was absolutely stunning to me, Molly, you would have read this book, Behind the Mask by Annika Martin.
Oh yeah.
And that flower
yeah.
being added after, and like the absolute gorgeousness of this flower. It's like this flower, I think it's in South America. It's the local industry economy completely relies on this flower. They spend all year farming it, and then they have to get it. They have to harvest it before it blooms, because once it blooms, it dies and it's gone. So they have this very small window, and then I think maybe there's rain or warfare, something stopping them from being able to do it. And they and it's this beautiful metaphor for like the entire thing. It is so woven throughout. You would just think it's the entire story, and then she's just like, yeah, I added that after. And I was like, you did? And she's like, yeah, I thought maybe it would be like a potato first. She had researched these kinds of plants it could be before settling on this flower.
A potato.
I know.
Oh, Annika. Okay, so can you guys tell us? Can you tell us what is next for each of you?
Well, so Carter Morelli just crash landed, frankly, on a deserted island. People are after him. He is sort of an Indiana Jones rhizomes professor, but he is also possibly some kind of spy. We don't know yet. It's just been hinted at, but either way, they're in danger. So we have a trilogy to write that's coming out with them. Force of Nature is book 1 of that. So you can read the crash for free just to see what it's all about. And then
highly recommend.
Amelia has a standalone. Mm-hmm. Shocking. I had to talk her into it. And she found it very stressful, but yet here we are. And that one's called Blackmail.
When is that out?
That one might be pushed back. It is
okay
at the end of July, but it's and then she'll have another trilogy, and then she's also doing Gabriel's story, The Hill Family. Did you already talk about The Hill Family?
No, okay.
Did Amelia tell you about the narrators?
Yes,
I texted her.
Coming here to love on her at Book Bonanza. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, she said she had a good time.
Mm-hmm.
She said it was stressful, but she had a good time.
Yeah.
So you've started a trilogy, Gabe's book. So we're waiting on the second and third book on Gabe's trilogy. Yeah. You have started another trilogy, the Carter Morelli story.
Yes.
With the free prequel that is out today. Mm-hmm. You have a standalone called Blackmail that in the Dangerous Press world, is it?
It's Emerson LeBlanc, who was in Dark Reign. It's his brother, Will.
So the artist's, the art collector's brother.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I explained to her that he is.
Oh, this is the
least tortured of the LeBlanc brothers. He obviously is still tortured. Otherwise, what is the point? But like,
he's not screwed up enough for a trilogy.
He's not screwed up enough for a trilogy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish
we did talk about that. We did talk about how backstory dictates how much plot there is. Okay. And then Skye, what have you got? One for the Money is out. So we're waiting for the second book in that trilogy.
1 for the Money and then 2 for the show.
When is that?
And 2 for the show is in August. And then
how's that going? You write it?
Have I written it? Did she just come out here?
Are you writing it now?
Yes, it is in progress. It is I think it is one of the 4 that 4.5 that she said. I don't even know what she was counting, but
yeah,
we count them all in the same pool, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's in progress. I love it, actually. It's a very...
Oh, it's an arranged marriage, maybe pregnant.
Fake
marriage.
Engagement, yeah. Possibly pregnant. Surprise baby. And it's hard because like tropes like that sometimes I struggle with, because you've got to really make it feel, I think. like there's no way they can be together. Like
Yeah.
there's no way they can't be together. They are so good together because they're so perfect together. But you have to really believe that this conflict is so big that it's going to block them.
Because they have to spend all that time together, either pretending to be in a relationship or, in each other's proximity, that we see how well they get along. I mean, it is the bar was set with that. Skye, you're gonna know it. Oh, crap. The arranged marriage, the Western, or not the Western, the historical romance. We Love Her So Much. Sherry Thomas.
Oh yeah.
And they were married, and she loved him, and like her family ran like a bottling company, and she was very wealthy from this bottling company. But they arranged this marriage, and he loved somebody else and has loved somebody for else their whole time. And she has finally set him free to like go pursue.
You're talking about Private Arrangements, right?
No, it's in the trilogy.
Oh, okay.
Someone will comment on
She definitely is queen of like both marriage tropes and second chance romance.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, His at Night is just a work of actual genius. Yeah. And that is what I'm talking about with the joke blurb, by the way. Now you have to read that, Amelia. That book is like just a joke blurb that just like then stabs you in the heart. That's what it's all about.
Okay, I gotta find this book.
I don't remember what the title is already, but
the title is not that specific to the.
Hold on, it's called Ravishing the Heiress. Yep, Ravishing the Heiress. Sherry Thomas. Go read it right now.
No, I really just feel strongly that you need to read His at Night first. His at Night. It's a big yellow cover.
Yeah, you can read that first too.
She's like,
she's not gonna read any of it. Okay, gang. I've lost you. Woo! I cannot wait to see you again. I hope that it's very soon. Oh, something? I had a question for you from a woman who wrote in who wasn't going to be able to listen to the live. And her question was about, she knows in following your social media, and this is a serious topic, but I know that you have both been super outspoken about it and have thought about it and struggle with it in a way that I feel is real and more authors should talk about, which is the author was watching you guys on social media at Book Bonanza and had, as everybody did, had, total, missing out, whatever that's called, FOMO. But at the same time, she was wrestling with the idea of a state that is taking away so many rights, particularly for women. Like the idea of going to a signing there she wasn't comfortable with it. How do you guys wrestle with that? I mean, I know that you both think about it, and does that play into your plans in the future?
The interesting part for me was just that, as my feeling on it personally was that the state of Texas didn't really change its opinion and stance on anything. And it was the country that did. So I'm mad at the country that can leave the country if I really want to. And I mean, we didn't discuss it now, but it has been discussed in my household. But to leave over that part confused me. And I support anyone who wants to protest in any way they want. But for me, it wouldn't have been a hesitation because it was literally the Supreme Court that changed.
And it's the same. Like you said, it is, for so many years, lawmakers in Texas have been clear about what they would do when the time came. Mm-hmm. And the time came and they did it. So it's not like it was a shock or changed. Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, my feeling is just that it is very much a country problem, because that's what changed, right? So, but I mean, it is hard, and I think it speaks to the broader question of, how do we protest both big things like that, and even smaller things. A lot of people are like, I don't like to buy big. I don't like big stores. I like to shop local. But then, like, how do I reconcile the fact that Amazon is a big part of our worlds as authors? So I think you're always in a position of having these partners or these choices that are going to touch on things because we're in essentially, when you talk about, things like sexism and racism, we're in a poisoned world, right? I remember I had this conversation with Amelia, because like most of us are pretty liberal, and she is too. But the one thing I couldn't, I've been indoctrinated heavily into capitalism. So even though I like take a step back, there's still part of me that's like, and then TikTok was determined that I should know that this is not okay, and that billionaires are always stealing. And so we would have a lot of conversations where I would just make her like mock debate this situation with me, because I'm like, how is like Rihanna is now a billionaire. I was like, so is she a thief? Or like,
right.
Or like all billionaires are evil. And I'm like, and I asked her, I was like, do we mean most or do we mean all? And she was like, well, all. And I was like, okay, but then how,
Yeah.
And then I have been coming around to that way of thinking, of understanding that, okay, well, she's still of course, Rihanna's not going in and stealing from people's pockets, but she's still working in a poison system where someone is harmed, especially in our line of work as authors, because we see it happen, right? Like when you say billionaire, most people, or 1% or whatever, people think about, sort of a CEO, a white old man, like that kind of person, probably who had family wealth. But in the author community specifically, we see people come up out of essentially poverty, right?
Yeah.
And if we don't know exactly what they're earning, it's still enough to put them pretty high up there. And then if you invest that properly, then you can become whatever. So I think it just comes from that, like knowing we're in a poison system. Like there's going to be something in every state and every city that I don't agree with.
Right.
And I know that I am speaking a lot, so I'm going to let Amelia speak in 1 second. But I also wanted to say that I think part of the reason why, we all struggle with it for sure.
It is. And I feel like there's the world in general has gotten, there's not a nuanced conversation to be had online in any capacity, but every writer struggles with this. Every writer, well, not every writer, but so many writers I know struggle with their relationship with Amazon. So many writers struggle with the idea of traveling and spending money, giving money to a state that the politics they don't agree with. Like these are things that everybody's thinking about in a way, and writers aren't any different. Like,
oh, right. And really what we're a community of is a lot of small businesses. So so when you're not in a small business, when you just sort of have a regular sort of corporate job, you do want to work for a company that aligns with your values, but a lot of their decisions, they don't even get run by you, right? As a small business, all these big decisions of who to work with and where we're going to get most of our money comes from us. Like we have to grapple with that. So it's definitely tricky. But what I wanted to say, I just really like, there's a lot that I don't discuss with people because I feel how I feel for myself. I feel very strongly enough about it in the way that I live my life. But I also have decided early on, I'm not going to tell other people how to do it. So like being a vegetarian, like breastfeeding my son, like things like that. They're just personal choices that I felt very strongly about. And I respect another woman's right to do that. And us arguing the nuances of it isn't really going to help. So I guess I got used to the idea that I would always, I would always in a room, 100% of the people are going to disagree with me on something important to us, right? Like there's not going to be anyone that we did everything the same.
Right.
And those are all moral decisions. So, I think we do have to protest what's important to us and we all get to decide that. But there's also a lot of, understanding that comes from just dealing with people and being different on so many points and not just a few.
Right.
Okay, Amelia, you go.
Oh, I would say not as much as that probably, but I was reading about this idea of boycotting states and travel kind of early on in the pandemic. And I read an article back then, like 2020, that was talking about how it doesn't really work because usually when, because a lot of people were on social media, like, I will not do my annual vacation in this state anymore. And some people were saying that about Michigan where I live. And I was kind of like, cool, because like, I like it when there's no tourists here. But it was kind of like, this doesn't really have the impact that you're imagining that it's going to have because what we really need around these issues is collective action. And so I think the idea of like one person's protest against, going to a book signing, like everyone should do it. Like you shouldn't go to a book signing in a state that you don't want to.
Yeah, if you're uncomfortable with it entirely, yes, you
Yeah,
don't go.
like don't go. But when you're saying like, so, for example, just like I'm not going to go to Texas because they don't, have the same views on women's rights, which, like, to be clear, I think the state of Texas is really wrong on this. And I think the Supreme Court is wrong on this. Like, women should be full citizens. But like, what impact is that going to have? The state of Texas, I don't think, is going to know if you're not in that ballroom, signing books. And so it's just kind of like, it just strikes me as more of like an individualist take on like, how are we going to fix this? Well, like it's going to be me by myself. And it's almost never true that it's going to be you by yourself fixing something. So I personally was still going to go because I wanted to meet like readers of my books. And for me, that had a much bigger impact on, my relationship with them than it ever would on,
Right.
Some broader policy that's not, I just think necessarily it has to be a collective thing for so many of these issues that, it doesn't always.
It kind of reminds me of recycling because, like, in my family, we recycle. It's very important to us. Like, if something can, we know something can be recycled, don't throw it out. Why would you do that? But Carolyn, because of who she is and because of where she lives and they have a better program, recycles much more responsibly than me. A lot more gets recycled, it gets sorted better, whatever. And the idea, for her, it'd be a big down step to do what to do what we have available and to do it the way that I do it. But at the end of the day, guess who's really causing the landfill problems? Corporations.
Which is not an excuse to do nothing, but
exactly.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it's just understanding the scope of like what we're trying to combat right now. So, but it's always a personal choice, though. I would never tell me don't recycle or Carolyn don't recycle.
I live in Canada, and the news in Canada about the States is exceedingly negative, right? Like I mean, the news in the States is really negative, and my kids are very active. They're very sort of politically active. They're certainly politically attuned and young, good socialists, taking care of everybody. And they say things about places in the South. And I have to remind them that in those places, in places like Texas, where the news is so bad, there are people fighting so hard for rights. There are organizations who are doing everything they can. And we went to North Carolina when North Carolina was doing the bathroom ban thing. Like they put up this whole thing. And I remember we're talking about it with our kids, and I didn't feel great about it. I was like, oh, why are we going here? But then you realize you go to these stores who have made a point of putting our bathrooms are for everybody, no bathroom ban, all of that stuff. And locals are hating on them. Locals are loving them, whatever there it is. But it was our pleasure to go and give them our money, right? Like that was how, like, we were able to find a way to support a cause. These fighters who need, all of these fighters in these places need that kind of help. So
that is a really good idea. About helping the small businesses, right? Because and then they're going to have to suffer among their certain members of their population for doing that. But it kind of reminds me, I watched this YouTube short, well, it wasn't a short, I guess it was like 30 minutes, but of this guy, I believe he was Black, and he went to the most racist town in America. It was just like purported to be the most racist town. So he was like, let's go find out. And no, I would not have that much courage. So he goes there with like hitches a ride. He's got a cameraman, but that's it. And he's like, let's go out at night. And, every cell in my body is like, don't do it. I mean, you made it back, to put this on YouTube. So you're probably fine. But I'm like, don't do it. And so he goes out. It's a small town, so like nothing is really happening at night. It's dark out and everything's closed. And this guy approaches him and he's like, "Hey," or and he, I think he flags him down and he's like, "Hey, where's the nightlife? Like, what's going on tonight?" And the guy is like, "Oh man, this isn't." And he's like bearded white guy, and I'm like, he could be your enemy. And then that guy's like. And he's like, "Oh, well, what are you doing if there's no nightlife?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm just having a card game." And he's like, would you like to come? And like, I'm in Texas. I know all the imagery of what he's about to enter. And he goes in this little shop, and it's like a geek shop, and they're playing Dungeons and Dragons. And it's just, and they're like, "Yeah, we really think seriously for your own safety, we would like you to go. We care about you. We need you." like it was just this like, I went into this preconceived notion of like who this would be, and that here he found this ally like a first try, so.
Yeah, there are people fighting and there are people who need support in all of those places. And if you need a reason to go to a place that you're feeling pretty bad about, think about that. There's a lot.
I mean,
but also stay where you're safe. You know what I mean? Like,
don't do anything dangerous. But whenever you go somewhere, it's like, it's never, the red state, blue state thing is just never representative of like the people that are actually there. And then when you think about, like, it's like in stories, it's a matter of scale, right? So like what we see happening a lot of the times when states pass policies that are terrible is that corporations are the only ones on a scale to be like, knock it off. Like that,
right, which is
like
so amazing.
And so you can put pressure on corporations to do that for sure, but like you got to do it strategically. It has to be specific to the situation to bring up a book thing. Very specific.
Oh, we really went off topic. Anyway, dark romance, sex, backstory.
Ladies, rhizomes.
Rhizomes. Put that on a throw pillow. These interviews usually last about 40 minutes. We're on to an hour and 30. So
what you're saying is we should keep going. That's what you're saying.
Guys, thank you so much for spending time with me tonight. Everybody out there, please pick up one of these 5 books that everybody's writing right now. But you can start with the Crash free prequel that's out today. Start with Power Play. This is the Gabe Hill, Elise Betancourt revenge romance where he's more damaged than you think. And 2 for the Money, or 1 for the Money, is the first book in Skye's latest trilogy. And pick up any book.
God, that would make a great tagline for Amelia. Were we doing taglines? He's more damaged than you think.
That's the tagline for everything, baby.
All right. End scene. Thanks, guys.
Everybody out there, please stay safe. Have a drink, read a book. We'll see you. I'm off on sabbatical for 2 months. So see you in September, everybody. Bye.
Bye.